Setting up your meeting for YouTube Live. All right, we are on. Can you guys hear me?
जी
Okay, YouTube पे जाके देखें आपको मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
नहीं
Hold on.
अभी नहीं आ रही।
Let me unmute on YouTube now. Assalamu alaikum. Can you guys hear me?
नहीं यूट्यूब से नहीं आ रही। अभी तक यूट्यूब पे आया नहीं है, इवेंट स्टार्ट नहीं हुआ, अभी वो 5 मिनट दे रहे
नहीं, इवेंट स्टार्ट हो चुका है YouTube के ऊपर।
हैं। मेरे पास जो आ रहा है अभी तक, मैं दोबारा फिर करता हूँ एक।
Yep, I can see Sana on the YouTube now.
एक मिनट में देखता हूँ, नहीं मेरे पास नहीं आ रहा अभी तक।
Somebody has to check if we are able to.
ये 3 मिनट्स दे रहा है अभी ना।
It's still showing 3 minutes. Okay, two watching now. Started streaming less than 1 minute. So it's just you and me then watching, yeah?
एवरीथिंग इज फाइन। आवाज आ रही है, यूट्यूब पे भी आ रही है। अब खामोश हो जाएं।
Okay, मैं अपनी तरफ से इसका मतलब अनम्यूट रखूंगी इसको. So it is working. Perfect. ठीक है. Let me see. Only I can make co-host, or you guys can also do it.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Brother Sahil, Brother Kesar, and Raja, can you both hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
That's great.
Alaikum assalam. Yes, I can.
Okay. Yeah, I'll turn on my video as well. We'll just give it a few more minutes before more people to come in.
I think we should start. Let people come in. जो लोग आ गए हैं, उनका वक्त बताओ.
Yes, sure, inshallah, we can start. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jazakallah khair everyone for joining us. So we have Brother Kesar Ahmed Raja and Brother Sahil Adim with us. And the topic today is Shaam truly liberated? Before we even go into a lot of detail, I want to share a little bit of perspective so we are all on board and everybody's aligned with what's happening, which I'm sure you are. But just to give us a little bit of background into Syria and Sham with the current situation. So I'll share my presentation, which is only about 5 minutes long, just to give a bit of a perspective. So on this screen, because this podcast is hosted by the Global Awakening platform, and I'm Dr. Ume Harris. I'm one of the co-founders of Global Awakening. This one is our first podcast ever, so Jazakallah khair to the guest for joining us and giving us the leverage to discuss such an important topic. If you would like to join our community, there is a QR code on the screen which you can scan, and you can join our WhatsApp groups where you can be updated with everything. So the question is Shaam truly liberated? And even before we go into that, before we even go into the topic of is Shaam liberated, why is Shaam important? I'm just going to reflect that a little bit. So Shaam, according to the ahadith, is, and according to the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also evident from the Quran, that it's something very important and very dear for the Muslim, not only just Muslim, it's for the entire mankind. So this is one of those regions where Christianity, Judaism, in Islam, you believe in all the prophets, and those prophets walked on these lands. And Sham is not just present-day Syria. It's a much bigger place. It includes Palestine. It includes all the sacred lands around it. And before we even go into Sham, the very first house of Allah on this earth was Kaaba in Mecca. And what is even happening on our holy land there, and what is happening on the holy land of Sham? All these are very important perspective for the Muslims to understand, and also to wake up, to know your responsibilities. And this podcast, Brave Minds, will inshallah go in further and further details. Today is just the start. So what actually happened in Sham? This is a very quick recap. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. The Islamic perspective that I've mentioned, I've recently listened to a podcast by Brother Mudassir from the Revival Studio. Someone will post a link for that in the chat. For those who speak Urdu, for them it will be a really good listen. So you can look at the whole picture there. But in terms of, let's go into quick history. The Muslim Khilafah ended with the Ottoman Empire. A lot of the regions were colonized. New boundaries were drawn all over the world, especially the Middle East. And that's where you have Palestine under the British, the Syria region under French colonizers. And from there, the Zionist regime came in Palestine, and the French regime in Syria appointed different people eventually. Bashar al-Assad. And this was where the New World map under New World Order Syria was, according to the French monopoly. And now the Syria region is under Al-Wathi's tribe. Al-Wathi's tribe, very, very interestingly, they are very distant sect of Shia, and they're not anywhere near mainstream Sunni. In fact, some of the mainstream Shia sects also separate them from that tribe. But they occupied this land for a long time. After years of oppression and treachery, it turned into a civil war. And this was not black and white as well, because within this, there were vested interest from the West, vested interest from Russia, from the Arab lands. So it wasn't one person's game. There's a whole lot of monopoly going there. But all in all, we ended up with 5 different groups that joined hand together in bringing up the current revolution, where Syria is now under a joint collaboration of these groups, which is, I've written down here, SNA, SDF, HTS, Southern Operation Command Center, and Free Syrian Army. Now, if you look at it, you're like, oh, these are the 5 groups, but they are a lot more complicated than that. So, for example, the HTS, the group where Jelani is from. Even if you look at that, there are lots of different organizations from Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham. You're going into, like in this picture that you can see under the Fatah al-Mubin. So it's not that one person can just go ahead and make a decision. It's not like a typical country at the moment. It's not an easy thing to understand. I just wanted to throw this complicated picture that on top of these factions, you have a lot of underneath groups. So what's actually happening? So why is this topic even important? So I like to be up to date. I'm just a normal person like everyday Muslims. So when I looked at what happened after October 7, I saw Muslims, non-Muslims, everybody who wants to stand on justice, those chose their group and stood together. Now when it came to Shaam, it looks like people are dividing into groups. But what kind of groups? We have, for example, Sheikh Yasir Qadi. He's given a good lecture in terms of lessons from Syrian Revolution, where he's more inclined towards the new regime. Then we have Al Jazeera. They are giving their perspectives very clearly that this is a good thing that happened. Syrian liberation happened. Then we have Thinking Muslim. They did a very good podcast as well. So these are all in favor. These are big names. These are big people who are involved in the lives of daily Muslims. So it matters what they say. And then we start to see, Sheikh Omar Suleiman, he's giving, mashallah, beautiful lectures on it. Then at the same time, there's amazing that we start to see these Twitter infiltration where people are talking about, what's happening. This is not complicated. This is something very good happened. It's pro-Arab, pro-Muslim. And then we start to see the propaganda from CNN coming. They also support this, whereas this video specifically came out as they were, setting up a show there. And then, people like Mansour Shaman, who became very famous during the Palestine thing after October 7, and even they are very happy about what happened in Syria. And there are further complications. So these are kind of those people who are like, yes, we're happy what happened, but at the same time, we don't trust some of the groups because they're backed by US and Israel, and they have their own vested interest. Or some are backed by Turkey. So these are, again, another ground. Then there are news such as redrawing the map. Israel seeks to remake the Middle East to its own advantage. So these are the groups who are not happy with what happened. And then, while Israel is attacking Syria, And now it's advancing more and more and more. Why is Jolani quiet? So these are all the questions that come up. So some of the things that people do in counter narrative to this, so there are lots of narratives being built up. One of the narrative is that, well, Jolani did whatever he did. He's liberated Syria. He's not standing against Israel because Israel has destroyed 80% of the capabilities of the country, military capabilities. And he needs to find stability in his country. That's one answer that's been given. And if Jolani was truly a puppet of US and Israel, then why would they do this to Syria now? So that's another thing. Some people think it was a job. Jolani is just a puppet. So lots of narratives. Again, those who are on Twitter savvy, one of the famous space on Twitter of Suleiman and Khalisi, they were very pro Palestine, but when it came to Syria, they have very different narrative. And again, a lot of those who were from the West, from US, from Spain, and from other countries, they were standing up for Palestine. But in terms of Syria, they are very confused. So that's where, then what's the role of MBS? He shaked hand with Assad, and then what happened next? There's even these tweets are coming up that actually Assad sold a lot of the secrets of Iran and Lebanon to Israel, and he was making normalization with the Arab countries. However, he was backstabbed. We don't know what the truth is. Again, really famous names, Richard and Scott Ritter, they're all again against this. So a lot of questions are coming up. And that's the reason I decided let's do a podcast on it. This podcast, in my mind, is something very important. The aim, the intention for myself for this podcast was to unite the Ummah, especially our youth, those who are learning from Twitter. So I wanted to make sure that you know how to navigate through this difficult time from this Dore Fitan. So with that, I will ask Brother Qasser Ahmed Raja to throw further light on this topic. And that's the end of the presentation from my end.
I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes, we can hear you.
You can. Okay, well, I'm going through some technical challenges, so I'm not sure if you can, whilst you can hear me, if you can also see me. I'm not entirely certain, but let's hope that you can. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to everyone, to yourself, Sister Haris, Nusail Bhai. Well, before I say something, there is an important disclaimer I need to mention that because we are commenting on a developing situation which is rapidly changing, so whatever we are going to say, it's probably going to be valid up until this point. If you are listening to this podcast, say from just a few days from now, things may well have changed by then quite significantly. So the question whether Shaam is liberated, you alluded to it, that Shaam is not Syria or Surya in Arabic. It's a much, much wider place. It's Levant, and in fact, the name Surya was only acquired after the First World War. So when we talk about Sham in its true sense, we are talking about Gaza, and we are talking about the West Bank, and we are talking about the entire Palestine and a number of other Middle Eastern countries. So are they all free? Well, certainly not. Now, one can make an argument that not all countries are suffering as Gaza is suffering or the West Bank is suffering. Then how can we have a uniformed answer to say simply no? Well, the answer seems to me is that normally when you answer this question, one has to deal with the conception of freedom. What does it mean to be free? Is it just that you don't have a foreign occupant who is killing people indiscriminately? If that is not happening, then are you free? Well, yes, you could be, but at the same time, if your foreign policy is occupied, if you have very limited access to your own resources, and you are very much limited in your decision making. Your sovereignty is not there for all practical purposes. Well, that's not freedom either. It's just that people are not killing you ruthlessly, but you're still not free. So putting everything together, then applying this question whether Sham is now liberated, no, it's never been in last 100 years, and still that's not the case. Now, what is happening in the country of Syria itself? Well, the situation is equally confusing, because what we do know is that there is a different government now, and there are people who are taking stances, and unfortunately, what we are doing now is very accurately describes a hadith in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that this is not the verbatim, this is the gist of it, that when you see evils breaking out in Sham, that means there is no longer khair among you. Now, what is happening now in the country of Syria, which is part of the Grand Sham? People are more concerned with the affiliations of their masalik, or affiliations of whatever the political affiliations they have. They are still talking from that premise. So the people who are commenting on Sham, are they really liberated? And the answer seems to be no, because this clearly looks like that we don't have khair anymore, that we have a country which has gone through a drastic change. And we are still not talking about the unity of Ummah. We are not talking about how, as an Ummah, we can resolve it. It's all about what Iran has done, or what Iraq has done, or what Israel is doing, and what other countries are doing. And again, it's everybody is claiming, making a certain claim. And this is something which is very much a clear indicative of the fact that we don't have khair among us anymore. Now, who's going to rule Syria is another question, and I think with that question, even bigger question is what would happen in the neighboring areas, for example, Israel, because it is becoming more and more confirmed now that the new Syrian setup, the governing setup, they are not interested in having any kind of adventure in Israel, or they're not willing to do anything to secure the freedom or liberation of Palestine. Now, there are two different types of opinions here. Yet again, there is one camp who says that, well, they absolutely should, if they could get fighters from all over the world, and they could, within 2 weeks, if they could topple a half a century long setup, why can they not do the same just on the other side of the border? And the other camp says, well, what do you expect? A newly conceived country for all practical purposes. They're resetting everything, and now they are, getting back. So what do you expect them to do? Start another war? So both arguments are relatively valid depending on how you look at them. So honestly speaking, no one knows what is happening. What we do know is that there is a lot of international players, and they all have their own vested interests. With SNA, Turkey wants to have more and more of inroads into the Syria, and then we have the SDF. Obviously, they have a very particular purpose there, and they are backed by US. US seems half interested in it, but at the same time, because it is very close to Israel, it can't simply remove itself completely from the situation. So their presence can only be accommodated through SDF, which has been given very hard time by SNA, and all these people were together when it came to taking Assad out. SDF now, on the paper, they control the vast, and probably more than any other group, and not even probably, certainly more than any other group. But that is not good enough for Turkey, because Turkey sees SDF having very strong connections with the rebels inside, the Kurdish rebels inside Turkey. So they want to drive them further east of Euphrates, or maybe further down, further away from the border. This is what they are looking for. And obviously, US is not going to be happy with that, because they can see a very clear corridor that runs right from the Golan Heights to the Jabal al-Daruz, and from there to where the American the military base is in Antan, and then from there it connects with the border of Iraq, the part of Iraq where Kurdistan is. And if that corridor is connected, it gives them the direct access to the Iranian border. And, SDF can't let that go because they do have an interest in Iran as well, because they want to have a united Kurdistan that is already scattered in 4 different countries, part of which is Iran. US would love to have that opportunity to have that kind of civil unrest in Iran, and imagine people asking for a Kurdish state. A Kurdish state. It only makes US more relevant, but it puts Turkey on a detrimental position because it doesn't want any of that. That's why it wants SDF to go further away. So it's a lot of international power struggle going there, and unfortunately, people of Syria at the moment, they are as confused as everybody else is. And one of the things, and I'm sorry I've taken too much of your time, it's the last thing I'm going to say, then I'm going to shut up. That is that when it comes to building a nation, people need to have a clear vision. Just like anybody else in the world, Syrians don't seem to have that clear vision at the moment.
Jazakallah khair. No, you didn't take a lot of time. And I think the problem with the clear vision is indeed, what options do they have? They're very stuck as a people. And when you were mentioning about Iraq, it reminds me of the hadith. I cannot remember the exact words, but the gist of it is that when there will be, people who stand on the truth moving into Sham, those who evil will be coming in Iraq. It was something along those lines. So I don't know where we stand at the moment, whether these are the events that's going to happen in the future, or these are the events that, before Third World War, whether we are actually in there already, or whether that's even going to be worse later on. So I would like to ask Brother Sahil Adim to comment, if you would like to comment so far what we have discussed.
No, I don't want to prolong this prelude because this is very productive. Most people who will be watching this podcast would not know, and that's the problem, that we don't really get to do our homework in the basics. So the more you get to know, the more you get to see what you can take out as a Pakistani or wherever you're listening from, as to how to incorporate these sort of events and generate enough IQ to know your duty in your own places. And we're not just isolated into Pakistan anymore. This is some duty that every Muslim has, to understand what he can contribute towards developing what is the skill required per capita in the Muslim Ummah. And how do we develop that skill? Well, we develop the knowledge first. So, for example, Palestine. This was something which is just an emotional play for a lot of Muslims. They don't really know the first thing about Palestine or the history or whatever, other than the locals. And that's why I think most of the movement about Palestine could not happen. I don't want this sort of thing to happen for Syria. In my opinion, Syria is way more important than Palestine. And I know it's going to come as a surprise to many people that Syria is more important than Palestine. Well, yeah, it is by far the most written about in the eschatology of all the hadiths that we have, all the literature that we have. So much so that the day Prophet was born, the hadith about Shaam comes from there. And that's such an interesting hadith when Halima Sa'diya brought our Prophet back. That I cannot handle this kid. There's some special things that happen and which are extraordinary. So I do not know what to do, and I don't know if I can be able to protect him. And she brought our Prophet to Amina, radiallahu anha. And Amina, she consoled Halima that don't worry, this is not an ordinary child. You don't have to give this as a news to me. I already know that. I bore this child for 9 months. And I know how extraordinary this child is, because when he was still in my womb, there was a pillar of nur that used to go toward the Sham, and he was still in my womb. And this is the beginning of the word Asham in the Islamic literature for people who really are serious about how to treat situations and how to put, geographical locations in the hierarchy of eschatology. So Asham is obviously not just the Syrian territory now. Sham is obviously bigger than that. We should look at the map. For example, Hind. Whenever Hind comes into the portion of the ahadith that we have, that's not Pakistan. That's not India. That's a lot of area. So we need to know that this is not just any ordinary religion that we follow. We have a very global um, presence, even if, since 1400 years ago. So most of the Pakistanis, their mental disposition is that, yeah, it's too far, and this is an Arabian local problem. Well, no problem is a local problem for a Muslim. We should look at every single event, and we only have one stencil. And just like you open the Torah, any verse can be the most important verse in the Torah or in the Bible, if it is, spoken about, that the subject is written about in the Quran as well, or is spoken about by the Prophet ﷺ. So all of a sudden we find a stencil validating or doing the opposite. So Asham, Syria, is probably the most important place for all Muslims. So much so that you'll find this word Asham in most number of quoted areas in the Hadith. Now, is it Syria? Well, this definitely is Syria and other areas, but Syria, current Syria, is part of that place. Let me give you a hadith, which is going to enlighten most of the people who are going to listen to this podcast. That Prophet ﷺ said that there will be sanctions, and that's the real word Prophet ﷺ used. There will be sanctions on Iraq. The Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, who's going to put sanctions on Iraq? And the Prophet ﷺ said, the Romans are going to put sanctions on Iraq, which means the Europeans. So then Prophet said, then there will be sanctions on Asham city. That the companions asked the Prophet, who's going to put sanctions on Syria? And the Prophet said, the Ajam is going to put, non-Arabs are going to put sanctions on, which means the world, which means the whole world. Now, these two things have happened. Iraq has gone through the sanctions, and Syria has gone through, all of that area has gone through sanctions. It could be the World War, it could be the post-World War sanctions, it could be the Saddam era, post-Saddam era, obviously. Now, or the WMD, shebang that we all went through. Now, the Prophet said that the best of the people will come to Damascus at the time and the end of times. Well, that just takes away the cake. The best of the people will come from Damascus. Of course, there's a long narration of the Prophet talking about the best of the people coming from Damascus. They'll be riding south on their horses. And even so, that there will be a lot of people who are not going to be Muslims are going to come through via Syria from the north, which are going to be allies. So this is such an important place. So any Muslim, especially in non-Syrian territory, who does not really know what's going on, is actually not understanding how critical this area is. Now, who are those people who will be the best of people? Well, I do not know any other stencil but the Quran to find out what is the behavior of the people, what have they done, under what influence. Only that we can prove. Obviously, we can't just throw conjecture and start throwing darts in the air. But something which is evident is that Bashar al-Assad was an obvious evil to many things. I know I am for Hezbollah, and I am for all the Iranian, initiative. And of course, he was playing a good enough role. But if he was playing that good of a role, then he could have and would have done a lot more, and should have done a lot more. Even though I know what he did, and I have not just CNN or BBC coverage telling me what he did. There's so many people. I mean, the way he treated the Ikhwan, and the way he's massacred women and children of Muslims within his own land, the way he treated them for decades. Guantanamo Bay would look like heaven compared to what Syrian Bashar al-Assad regime was making Muslims go through. So I'm not a guy who looks into Nusayris and Shias and Sunnis and whatever. I have no. I don't think like this. I don't think any Sunni is as more important than any Shia when it comes down to the global initiative against Israel or the bigger forces. If it's Hezbollah, he's taking the initiative. I'm with Hezbollah. If he's some Ahl Hadith or some Salafi or some Ahl Sunnah who's taking the initiative in Burma or wherever in China, or I'll be standing with that person regardless of what is the color of the flag, as long as there is the kalima written in the flag. So Syria is something which is a proven fact throughout the Ottoman Empire and post-Ottoman Empire, throughout the Churchill era and post the the French um, time. We know that it is probably the biggest Muslim misery land, and where there's misery, there's the silver lining, the Allah Azza wa Jal. And now I know through reading the pattern that why the best of the people will come through Syria. Well, the filter is very simple. The more the calamity, the purer the quality of mu'mineen in that area. And probably the biggest calamity, including Palestine, I'm telling you this right now, it might just come as a surprise, but including Palestine, the biggest calamity in a stretch of the time has come within Syria to all Muslims, and bar none. I mean, there is no comparison. There's, if you read, which of course I have other reasons to actually, interact with that area. So I know that, Jabhat al-Nusra was publishing papers and for since throughout the 90s into 2000s and whatever was going on, uh, regardless of if CNN or BBC was coming or not, Muslims knew who wanted to know what was going on and how deep this calamity is and how big of a tyrant this regime and whoever was supporting the regime was. When it comes down to America or Russia or whatever's going on, I mean, or Israel, they're gonna keep playing chess regardless of whether it is a Momin or a Manafik. It doesn't matter. They have their own purpose and they're true to their purpose. And I'm not talking about America. Obviously, I'm talking about Israel. So I don't really factor that in on stage one. Stage one is when we looking within our own Muslim land and see who's directed where. For example, ISIS. There is only one qualifier of whether ISIS was right or wrong, is their initiatives against the bigger problems. They were against anti-Muslims through day one, and I'm okay with it. If you're, because I am against MBS throughout. So I'm just looking into, okay, so what is it that you did? What is it? Where do you draw the line, and what kind of depth your lines are? Your actions are causing the Muslims. So ISIS gets disqualified themselves because other than torturing Muslims, they didn't do much. I'm not going to talk about ISIS here. Obviously, it is Syria. However, Muslims in Pakistan talk about ISIS as if it is it is probably a solution because they've used the word Khalifa and they're from Syria. So just like that, it's something which a Muslim, especially non-Arab Muslims, should raise their IQ, understand how to look at things, and we should reverse engineer everything from the end, which is the end of times, and connect it directly to the past, which is the 1400 years ago literature. Now, we know, Alhamdulillah, through our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, what is going to happen in the end. And we try and, put all of these territories in their own hierarchical position. And then you'll find out that, what, this is how I should look at things. And again, let me reiterate, if Muslims do not know what's going to happen to Syria, what happened to Syria, what is the role of people in Syria, then 50% of all of our worldview is blurred. So we should really, really read into it, see what's going on, why it's going on, And of course, then, put the torch of the current political worldview on top of that. So this is why I joined this podcast, so that people would know that, you know what, it's not just any other place. Okay. I hope I've made my point, and I hope I've answered your question.
You have, and I think just from your answer, I want to ask you, when you talk about reverse engineering, just wanted the problem in all of this that I see are the young ones. Like for example, when I was a teenager, I saw the Iraq War on my TV. But a lot of the younger ones, they haven't even seen those things. They are looking at Twitter, they're looking at a lot of bigger picture. When you talk about reverse engineer, how can they practically implement it?
Well, this is rather simple. Let's not make a rocket science out of it. Whatever Professor Salam said about these areas and what kind of events are going to happen. For example, I'll give you an example. Imam Mahdi, the concept is very simple. People who are going to fight Imam Mahdi are not non-Muslims. They're going to be Muslims. We need to understand, how do we reverse engineer? Well, he's going to fight ultimately against the Romans, but first three major battles that Imam Mahdi is going to go through is with Muslims. Now, how can we reverse engineer anything? Well, we use the literature directly from the Prophet ﷺ, and then we look at we simulate things. We simulate, for example, if Imam Mahdi comes in our time. Well, the first thing, CNN is going to cover that before Al Jazeera, and then Al Jazeera is going to counter whatever CNN is covering, or BBC, or whatever, or Fox specifically. And most Muslims are going to be confused, because most Muslims currently would, in their own current psychological disposition, their own worldview, Imam Mahdi will become Al Qaeda, or ISIS, or whatever. It's obviously, that's, I mean, that's how things roll. So most of the Muslims are not even going to do their homework. Why do you think I'm enforcing and making sure that the word Syria becomes so sensitive for all Muslims? So they would read their own, or read on their own, not listen to Al Jazeera or RT or CNN. And that's just not a Muslim way. So the standard of Islam are very clear. You gotta go through your own homework, and you gotta make sure you don't fall for the availability bias. The first few bits of data that you're gonna find out, you're gonna go deeper, way deeper, and you make sure that you counter all of your biases and go through all of the literature. Not just for example, Pakistan. We are all Pakistani. We don't even know what happened to the 71 war, because we think the Bengalis, rebelled against us. Well, we should look at all the literature and find out who did what. Okay. So you'll find out how to do research. So reverse engineer Imam Mahdi's time, and you'll find out that, this is exactly what's gonna happen. And why do you think the Dajjal is going to be so loved by the human beings? Well, we reverse engineer uh, the kind of calamities that people are going to go through the first 6 years before the Dajjal, and then you'll find out how psychology is paved into giving every group, the whole group gives into in these sort of things and events. So when we talk about Shaam, Shaam is very clearly written about and very significantly measured area. We see that the best of people are going to come from Damascus. Isa ibn Maryam is going to come from Damascus. Imam Mahdi is going to go to Damascus. The anti-Dajjal first skirmish is going to run through Damascus. What really? This is down southwest of Syria, the current Syria, Asham, down south, right on the border of Israel. So, we can reverse engineer most of whatever we can do. Now, what do we do as a Muslim? We look at how the current media, especially mainstream media, and of course social media, but mainstream media, develops archetypes. We develop we have a lot of hindsight wisdom through Iraq War, and the Iran-Iraq War, and the Iraq-Kuwait War, and the Iraq-Israel War, and the way MBS, the Saud family was erected right in the center of Arabia as the most powerful family in probably the world. After the Tsars, I think the Saud family come right next. So you know how to actually look into the worldview. Okay, Imam Mahdi is going to come, and people are going to recognize him, while three princes are going to be fighting for the power. Three princes where? Well, obviously Saudi Arabia. Why? Because the people from Khurasan are going to go give bayah to Imam Mahdi while he's going to be in Makkah, and he's going to migrate to Medina. So you need to see how to reverse engineer things very simply. I mean, it's not something that you need another handbook for. You just have the hadith. You just see whatever's going on in the news. How Osama bin Laden is a case study, and Afghanistan is a case study. How most of the Muslims couldn't really understand the concept of Osama bin Laden, couldn't understand the concept of Taliban, unless of course Barack Obama comes in, started using the word freedom fighters for the first time. Most Muslims were actually swallowing so easily the worldview of the American narrative. So you need to understand we only have one rhetoric, which is the hadith, which we should use as developing archetypes. So currently, HTS, ISIS, Jabhat al-Nusra, Syrian force, Bashar al-Assad, the Nusayri Shias, the Shias, the Sunnah, the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the Salafi regime, international scholars, the Islamic clerics in America. They all play a very good role in developing the Western. They strengthen the American archetype of any narrative. You need to get out of the clutter, go through it, and once you have developed, that's what the Muslim IQ should develop into. Do not just listen to the Muslims and the Western, but develop your own IQ through the Hadith and try and understand how these very Muslim clerics, we're talking about the Iraq War, during the Iraq War, during the Afghan War. Where were they? What were they doing? We all know they were actually paying into the Western narrative. I mean, there is no critical review. Nobody else was given. I mean, I was, I'm a first-hand witness to the written, the spoken, and the media-based word coming into my ears and my eyes. And I was thinking, I know firsthand what's going on in Taliban, like literally firsthand. And Muslims in Pakistan are so blurred away for whatever the reality and the actual truth is. So you need to understand how a Muslim IQ can be developed, and we need to open workshops right away about worldview, about geographical and political and demographical lines. What are the colors? Who draws those lines? Where do they come from? What is the purpose they serve? If a regular girl, 18, 19-year-old, and a regular boy, 18, 19-year-old, is not made capable of understanding, then people in England or people as Muslims in England, America, I mean, there's no chance they're going to be. You cannot save them. Our job is to save all Muslims from this dirty and filthy and fake narrative, and that hollow archetype these people keep feeding us. And understand that we're Muslims. We only look at one stencil, and we get our feed directly from the hadiths.
Sure, Jazakallah khair. I'm going to come back to you. There's a question for you in the chat, but there's a question for Brother Kaisar Ahmed Raja as well. Brother Kaisar, there's a question for you which says, Kaisar Bhai, kindly talk about this new idea of revolutionary nationalism instead of international jihadism. This trend has been seen in Taliban and now in HTS. Is this okay as a first step towards the final goal? That's some highlights Brother Sailadim already mentioned, touched upon this. Is there any further you want to add into this?
Well, it certainly is a good idea if the end goal is that it's going to be a united Islam everywhere, then surely
Your
it would.
screen is blurred, sorry to interrupt.
I'm very sorry about that. Let me quickly see if there is. Is this any better?
See you now, yeah, we can see you.
Well, okay, thank you. And sorry about that, of course. But it certainly is. It would be a good idea. I mean, if this is what they were ultimately looking for. But from what we understand is that this is not clear. I mean, if there's anything clear, that would be that what they are trying to achieve in our own countries. And when I say they, by that I mean the rulers of Afghanistan, or now the new rulers in Syria, put everyone together. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any indication that there is a greater goal after this. It is more of a nationalism, which goes very much against the run of play because this is not how it is supposed to be. The whole world is standing completely in a different direction. I know people are really invested into the idea of nationalism and so forth. Even our own seculars in Pakistan, they tell off people like myself, a number of other people who actually are raising their voices for what is happening in Palestine and Shaam and other places, and they very much speak from the premise of nationalism. But no, there is no such thing as nationalism. I mean, it has never been the case. I mean, there has been a little transition from at the end of the Westphalian Treaty, where the rule of the church was minimized to almost zero, and then it was handed over to the secular powers of the time. And then in between, we had different bodies progressing the same agenda. For example, the League of Nations has been one, and now the United Nations is one. So if you right now, if you look at any nation literally, you will see that it's part of a greater system. Now that greater system could be part of the European Union, or it could be the part of BRICS, or it could be part of even United Nations. I mean, if they don't fit themselves in any particular smaller group, then there's a bigger group. So that type of autonomy is not really there. So the question then has to be if the rest of the world is operating at the ummatic level, i.e., they've made their own ummas. They could be political unions or they could be financial unions and whatnot. What is stopping us from doing that? I mean, we don't have many other options. The only option we have is get together and think about what we have. And what we have is exactly what you need to build a civilization. Vibrant youth, nuclear power, natural resources, scientists, engineers working everywhere, they could be called back. So it's here. And how to coexist in a world where you become the next superpower, even that is called CR law. That is also what we have. So ultimately that is the solution because everyone is now joining bigger blocks and smaller blocks are now shifting, they're changing, they are trying to merge into something big. The countries that tried to depart from the bigger groups, they suffered happily. Think of the UK, for example. The post-Brexit UK is much more expensive and difficult to live in than otherwise because they jump from a bigger block. And the reason I'm giving these examples is so that people can relate to them that this is what is happening in the world and has happened in the recent past. So what our countries are doing in Afghanistan or in Syria at the moment, yeah, sure, they can take the argument that this you could derive a prophetic way from it, that what we call, for example, the Medina state, which was not geographically restricted to the city of Medina, it was much bigger and expansive, but it started from somewhere. So if this is the line of thinking being pursued, I think that's quite admirable. But I have my serious reservations. I don't think that is what is happening. It should happen, but I so wish that I am wrong. But I suspect that is not what is happening at the moment.
Um, if I just when you were talking, something came in my mind to see if we are ready for such a step. Let's go to the drastic measure. If Imam Mahdi comes tomorrow, are there going to be 12,000 people ready to be with him? Or is the Ummah ready even by 12,000?
This is not look, that's not the question. The question is that if Imam Mahdi, if he appears tomorrow and makes the global call, we've got 2 billion people. Why should there only be 12,000? 4,000 of whom are going to be defectors, by the way. So that ultimately is the bigger question. And we know it is going to happen that way, but it doesn't have to be because it is not imposed upon us. So if are these people going to make any, are going to go there? Well, uh, I'm not in a business of predicting future and predicting what individuals will do, but based on what is happening is what has happened in Gaza so far, what has happened in West Bank, and what has happened in other parts of the Muslim world. We have some lavish parties going on in Islamabad, for example. We've got some lavish parties going in Jeddah, for example. No one seems to be care. And a call from Imam Mahdi, these people, no, I don't think that would be the case. But again, I so wish I'm wrong on that.
No, that's the exact reason why I asked you this question. And I will ask this question from Brother Sahil as well. But just my perspective, the reason I asked this question is how can we be prepared to be ready to be at that stage? It's disappointing that we feel we are not ready, but how are we going to get ready for that
Well, if
stage?
I quickly jump into
Yeah.
that, recently I've been saying this a lot in different universities that irrespective of whatever the maslik you follow or school of thought or whatever jurisprudence you have, I mean, by all means, keep it. You know, you'll keep on doing what you're doing before, that is, i.e., doing the Rafaya then or not doing Rafaya then or praying with open hands or fine, those things will continue. But right now in Islam, there are just two sects, just two masalik. Is the masalik of people who are the people of Wafa, people who are the loyalists, and people who are the literally people who betray the system. And what people need to understand is that we are told that on the day of judgment, people will be brought together in different groups, and each group will have its own flag so the other people can recognize what they did. Just shut the door, be on your own, have some darkness in your room so you can be yourself, and then try to hear this announcement that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or an angel on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say that the people who were loyal to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gather under this flag, and the people who betray their Prophet gather under that flag. And after that, if you still don't know what you should do when the call is made, there is absolutely nothing I can say that will change because there is nothing that can top it. And know that it is going to happen. It's not a theory. It's not something that is, oh, okay, that also could happen. It is bound to happen. It's only 50, 60 years on this planet. That's all there is to it. Eternity is very long. It's called eternity for a reason. And that is where the real judgment will be made. And if you think that you're going to trade that for what you have here, the parties in Jeddah and Islamabad and Lahore and whatnot, trust me, there's nothing I can do that is going to change your heart.
Brother Sahil, any comments from your end?
No, I think we know there's going to be only 1.1% of people who are going to be with the Imam Mahdi. But you know what? I think judging everybody right now would actually pump nihilism in every child and mommy and daddy. So instead of us assuming that this is the time of Imam Mahdi, which of course is obviously not because he's not here, let's assume that, you know what, this is not that time. Let's assume that this is a time a couple of thousand years before Imam Mahdi and try and prepare everybody for the current regime of how warfare is done. Now, warfare is done. I mean, I totally agree with Kessler that the nation state is an obsolete concept now. Even, you know, I mean, you don't see any of those 10 things that nations used to do, which any country is doing right now, except that, you know, one occasional economic, you know, infiltration here and there, or some imperial malice that America or any other country would have upon any weaker country. Other than that, I mean, the nation concept is just not practiced per se. So what is the concept that is being practiced? And so what is the new version of human behavior? Well, the new version is very, very, you know, simple. You create financial silos and you combine as many silos as you can, regardless of what country you're actually, creating the silo. That could be a company, that could be an organization, that could be a fund, that could be any kind of lobby which has a singular purpose. And then you combine those silos, and then you call the shots on whatever, and countries are going to come and bid for your silo. It is that simple. This is how the current world is running. So if we can tell that this is, and we can read into how the current world is running, we can tell the Muslims to create their own financial silos, and that financial silo is going to become a political silo if you have more than one financial silo connecting with the other one. As soon as that happens, you are a politician of the current type. Now, if you are a politician, of course, it's going to be a group. So you actually go into the kind of warfare that every group is going through. So America is not a country anymore. America is a combination of a lot of financial institutes and companies, and they actually combine with European financial groups. Actually, they are being made. American financial institutes are made by the Europeans. So it's the other way around. So that's how things are done. Things are run. That's how regimes are made or destroyed or thrown or overthrown or made from scratch. Libya, for example, we know what happened to Libya. We're all old enough to know it just happened. Yesterday. So who did this? How did it happen? Well, whoever was behind Gaddafi and whoever was behind the overthrowing of Gaddafi. We know those groups. I mean, everybody knows those groups. We know what happened to Pakistan. Happens in Pakistan. We're Pakistanis. We know what kind of groups create and maintain power, and they're not in Pakistan. They're in Europe. And as much as we want to believe that it's in America, well, it's not. It's the European financial groups. They actually call the shots on most of whatever happened in India and Pakistan. So, can Muslims do that? Of course. We just have to teach them the new world order. This is the new world order. And 2 billion, I don't need 2 billion. We don't even need 200 million. We only need literally in thousands, because these financial groups have numbers which are in human capital, obviously, in thousands. They just have and money in millions, billions, and trillions. So do we have that money? Well, of course we can have that money. We don't have to. It's just like starting a business. You don't have to become a billionaire business by putting in $1 billion capital. You can start small, and then you work your way up. And that's how Muslims can do. Women and children are supposed to be trained to, and men, of course, to work on these lines, and they can become warriors. They can become, because this is the current warfare. This is the situation of the warfare right now. This is how wars are done. So can we become warriors? Yeah, well, technically we are warriors, because if you're not fighting with Islam in the current way of how wars are done, we are the warriors. Well, who? Well, the enemy. So this is how simple things are. The word tax becomes a totally different meaning now. The word, job and career becomes a totally different meaning. So if we know how wars are done right now, we can train our kids and redefine the word career, redefine the word, finance, economy, redefine the word politics, redefine the word, network. That's what we're trying to do, by the way, in England as well. We're trying to bring everybody in the masjid, every masjid, and connect every masjid and train them on these three core skills. Wealth, it comes from how is wealth generated, how is maintained. That's one. How is community made from zero? How is community or a group maintained? That's group two. Number three, what is the use of all of this? How to use it? How do you become warriors? Intellectual and psychological and financial and political warriors. This is literally how wars are done right now. No army man goes to any, no, I mean, do you see foot soldiers, except, India-Pakistan border or China-Pakistan border? And that too, it's not the armies. They're just little skirmishes. The big wars are running inside conference rooms now. So those conference rooms are paid for by these groups. Those conference rooms are actually made by these groups, and people who are going to sit in those conference rooms are dictated by these groups. You just need to create those groups. What do they take? It takes these three core skills. And this is the knowledge we should put in the curriculum of all IMS or revivalists or whatever you call revivalists, right? Or well, revivalist is the cassette movement. I'm talking about the revival studio you just said. I'm assuming they're two different things. So revivalists should train them on, IMS should train them on this regime, and it'll be very easy. Every money, every rupee, every every dinar, every taka, every dollar, every pound counts, because now we know how wars are done. So you're a contributor towards the bigger game. Now, who's going to call the shots in those groups doesn't really matter. What matters is where the group is, and how fast you can generate. And if you can get 10 or 12 groups globally, and how are we going to get them? Connect Australia with England, connect England with America, connect American overseas Muslims with European overseas Muslims, connect overseas Europe to overseas Africa. And I'm not talking about Pakistani overseas. I'm talking about in those lands, which are first world country lands, developed lands, where, because, I'm talking about economy and wealth. So we know where where, which is more precious now, which is less precious. So America becomes more precious, and England becomes a little more precious, and Europeans, and Spain becomes a lot more precious. So we know how to actually measure and then, make sure that people who are already there, they know this concept, they know this curriculum, they generate, enough connections and network, and hence the money is going to come in. And this is how war is done. It is rather simple. We've given up this. You know what? Unless I have a sword and I have a dagger and I have a shield, I cannot go to Syria. So, because the archetype which is coming from the Hadith is about those sort of things. So we somehow instantaneously give up as soon as we hear the word Syria. Well, people in England are not going to do anything. Muslims are talking about, because they know, or Pakistan. They think it's too far. Well, it's not that far. If you know how wars are done right now, you can be fighting the Syrian war sitting in Miyawali right now, or Manila, or Miami. Doesn't matter. As long as you know how wars are done right now. Israel war is not fought by IDF. IDF is the interface of how war is being done. The real war is being done in Washington and 10 Downing Street, and of course Paris and Berlin. So you need to find out how these wars are done, where these groups become your soldiers, and where the armament, the real armament industry, is not with tanks and guns and pistols and bullets, whatever. Real armaments are the psychological, financial, and the political assets. That's your real armament industry right now. Nobody fights wars anymore. So whatever's going on in Syria right now on ground, that's primitive. That's primitive. They'll be needing these resource groups from Pakistan or Bangladesh or Indian Muslims in Indonesia. They'll be needing them. They'll be dictated by these groups if we have those groups. Otherwise, they will be dictated by the European non-Muslim Zionist regime. And I won't be surprised. So you need to understand how the world is run and train it to our kids, and you'll make real Badri soldiers, real Ohad soldiers, real Ahzab soldiers. This is the actual little meaning of the new meaning of Ahzab. They know the meaning of Ahzab, and they've been doing it for the last 3,000 years, literally. And we just think Ahzab only happened once, and those were the enemies. We need to create alliances with the way we did in Hunain. We need to reverse engineer that into our current psychology, tweak it, tune it, make the child aware of it, understand only 3 things that are supposed to be done, and rest is just luxury.
Jazakallah khair. That's very inspiring. And I do remember that was what we discussed back in February, January time during your visits as well. The question that, not the question, but what needs to happen is to come out of our shells and actually be united. Think beyond personal wealth and think about collective wealth. That's the only way we can achieve اعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا. Otherwise, it's not possible. So the message is loud and clear. And this, like in Urdu, they say that panda tight hota ja raha hai aapke ird-gird. It's exactly that. We are getting tight and tight in our neck if we're not going to behave and learn and connect back to the Seerah. And that's one of the inspiration for us in the Global Awakening platform, the TGA platform as well, that we want to start training kids from a young age and mothers and take it all the way that we can, inshallah, be connected in the Akhirah as well. I would, any further comments from you, Brother Kesser, before I start opening the chat for questions from the audience?
No, I think let's jump straight to the questions.
Sure. Brother Khizr, would you like to take the first question? Ask somebody to unmute. I've been asking them to type questions in the chat.
जी sure. Huzaifa, unmute your mic, please.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Just before you say your question, the question has to be with the relative to the topic and in English as well. Jazakallah khair. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so my question to Sir Sahil is like, how can the correctness or authenticity of news be identified in these times? Because current political structure can only be understood by news. That's my question.
Well, that's exactly the opposite of how the current, information structures should be understood. News is it has become so polluted that you would have an easier time going towards the truth if you assume the opposite. Okay. So I don't care whether it's Al Jazeera or RT or whatever you like, because it's just, going against, what's the word, Fox and whatever regime of the, uh, what's his name? Rupert. Okay. So what you need to understand is that unless you have resources in the ground connected, there is no other way to find out what's actually going on. I'm sorry, that's how it is. As much as we would like to believe that, oh, this is the YouTube era, this is the social media era, no, nothing can be hidden. That's exactly the opposite of what's going to happen. And the Prophet ﷺ said that, whenever you're going to hear the news, you're going to have to go on the ground and see it with your own eyes. Unless you do that, it's not going to be the same. Okay, it's not the same. So that's a hadith, direct hadith. Okay. So what I need you to understand is, regardless of whatever's happening right now, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because we do not have the arsenal to deal with it. Even if for example, Syria, the other news had come in, and Syria all of a sudden had become a very peaceful and serene area. Would we be able to do something about it? No. So right now, this is an opportunity, not a threat. I think the more uh, you know tighter that rope is going to be around our neck, the quicker our kids are going to understand it, because we didn't do the job. We failed as parents. We failed. So our kids are going to grow into an inevitable mimicry of the Western, technique. And Muslims naturally are going to create their groups together. They're going to come and cling on with each other. Scandinavian Muslims are going to cling on to the English, and English are going to go to the Europeans, and so on and so forth. I'm telling you this right now. Make that archetype right now to your kids. Construct it. Tell them that this world should change on the back seat of the car with you on your laptop, writing just one article or one tweet or whatever, and a foreign policy should be changed. This is the archetype I'm talking to you as parents. Your kids are going to understand this way better than you can when you hear this statement from me. So understand, you need to know, or you to draw the map differently. This is the atlas should change right now. There are no 200 plus countries. There are only 3 different countries in this planet. These 3 different countries are fighting with each other. Everything else is a subordinate. And these 3 countries are not run by Beijing or Washington or Moscow. No, that's not how it works. These countries are run through different groups. They put certain faces in these conference rooms, in these White Houses, in these, you know, um, parliaments. That's the job of Muslims as well. Muslims should be calling the shots on whoever is in power in Islamabad or wherever. Muslims should be, with a purpose. And because these are people are just instruments. This chief of army staff is just an instrument. I'm not even going to say, Nawaz Sharif or whatever. They're not even instruments. They don't even qualify for anything. See, just like that, Bashar al-Assad was an instrument. Just like that, MBS is an instrument. Well, some days he acts as if he realizes that himself. You can see the look on his face a lot of days. So MBZ is an instrument. Whose instrument? Well, but not right now. That's not our instrument. Our kids should grow into a power, and that doesn't really require every of our kids to become billionaires. They need to be amazing in network, and you have to raise them with a single purpose. Once they are the people of the boys and girls of single purpose go into their career, they're gonna connect and enable that network. Enable that network. You only require what 6, 7, 8, maybe 10,000 kids to come together and spend 10 years of their own career in Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Melbourne, Miami, Houston, wherever, and they're gonna actually go into some sort of a career map. And even if you don't do anything about it, they're still gonna go do that. So let them go into it, and we finance these sort of people, our kids, into understanding the politics of things, going through those education and academia, making sure they're actually making enough businesses and make them entrepreneurs. Do not push them to go to jobs. Actually, enable them to make a lot more money as entrepreneurs, business leaders. And then you combine these two. Now I know in the long term we need the science because that's the actual source of wealth. We need physics. We need space programs. I understand that, but that's long term. I'm talking about short term. I'm talking about 15, 20 years, and we can call the shots because inevitably, my son, who's 14 right now, inevitably in 15 years, he will have some career, regardless of whether I do something about it or not. Just like that, the English Muslims, Canadian, American, Australian, European, only these people's kids, their career actually matter and can amount to that kind of wealth that can call the shots on some serious powers and then can hence create a power. So you raise the kids with this vision and tell them how to become close to come close to the ranks of the warriors of the prime of the Prophet, the Sahabas. You can do that without even shooting a bullet. You can do that. So that's how you're going to get this job done. And I know I keep reiterating this whole technique, even though you didn't ask for it. You asked me how to actually get the news. But that's the only way to get real news as well. Because if you do not have enough people with real power, you're not going to get real news as well. I'm telling you this right now. Weak people don't even deserve the truth. I'm telling you this right now. Weak Muslim doesn't even deserve to know the truth. That's how wretched and dreadful this word weakness is. Even if he's politically weak, he's financially weak, he's morally weak. So you need to understand only this is a luxury of the powerful to understand what's actually going on in the planet. Otherwise, we are just told what the powerful people need us to be, need us to know, need for us to know, need for them actually, to know. And we just keep getting this movie played right in front of us. There's no way to go behind the camera on this unless you have enough power to go behind the camera. So only Netanyahu, well, I swear, even Netanyahu doesn't even know the whole truth. Somebody else is calling the shots, because if he knew the whole truth, he wouldn't have been going through that kind of trouble that he's going with the ICJ right now. So you can get to see that there are a lot more things going on. So if you're not gaining strength right now in the next 10 years, then you are the enemy. I'm telling you this right now. Even if your name is, a Muslim name, you think you are a practicing Muslim and, you're doing whatever, even if you're doing something for the, jihad and khilafah and all of that stuff, you are the enemy if you're not gaining strength and you're contributing towards the strength. And this is the only way I look at the planet, because, like Kathir Bhai just said, there are only two kind of Muslims. One is the one with wafa, and one is the one with dagha. So I call all of those spectators daghabaz. Those are the treacherous Muslims who contribute towards the bigger problem. They are helping. Actually, they make the Muslim job so much harder because they contribute towards validating that weak and wrong archetype that our kids naturally would require out of their own laziness not to do anything. Because if so many Muslims are not doing anything, okay, well, then you know what? It's not the right thing to do anyway. So this is how I look at things, and I'm telling you, you're not going to get the truth unless you can have enough muscle to tear that fabric that they put right in front of us just to hide everything, and whatever they do behind that curtain.
So following on from your comment, there's actually an interesting question in the chat, which says that opinion on modern Islamic universities like Medina and Al-Azhar, are they linked to colonization of the Muslims?
Me? I mean, this
The
is
question of you.
Yeah, read and ask people. I know people. I mean, I not just know people. I work with them, who were dismantled by MBS from the Medina University because the French audit had to come and see what kind of curriculum this university is teaching. So he fired 32 people. He changed the management. He changed literally, everybody, so that the French would be satisfied of who's teaching what. And you know what? The people who remained there, one of those guys who I was talking to, he was actually interviewing me. And this guy is an associate professor. He said, you know what? Look at the blessing in disguise. If MBS did not do whatever he did, and he didn't fire those people who had Afghan flavor or Madudi flavor or whatever, because he fired everybody. He changed the curriculum. Now the Medina University still stands. Otherwise, the French would have, shut it down. I mean, imagine the guts this Muslim has to even think that France should shut down University of Medina and MBS saved it because French audits. Now the current regime passes the French audit requirements of what kind of Quran is taught and what kind of Hadith is taught. So you can do the math of who's going to qualify now, who's going to pass out like a graduate from this university, and who's going to do what. Those people are going to do nothing but feed into uh, in the name of Islam. The French premier is not as dangerous as somebody who's approved by French. He's a Muslim and he's got a degree in Islam, and he's got a power of the fatwa. There's a way more deadly weapon of theirs than a French premier called Cameron or whatever. And because he's a non-Muslim, no one's gonna listen to him. This dude is gonna call the shots in the name of Islam, and people are gonna be like, oh, a Jama'ah, this is a Jama'ah. These are a Muslim scholarship. Don't you know that this scholarship is audited, vetted, and validated by France? I mean, is it a secret? I didn't spill any secret here. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. So, colonial objectives? Oh my God, that's old news. Understand, three powers right now, and these three powers are fighting with each other to so that who would be the last man standing? Moscow, Beijing, and Washington right now. Okay, so you need to understand how to look at this planet and what kind of instrument. I mean, if you are running Moscow or running Beijing or running Washington, are you among your kind of person running these institutes which you named, because that controls literally close to 1.3 billion Muslims. They blindly follow whatever is going to come in, and not just emotionally but psychosocially as well. So that's an amazing power that you can get over 1+ billion people. That would be job one for any of these powers to get, and whoever gets it first takes over about half the planet right here. So you think, these are not tainted? Of course they're tainted.
Jazakallah khair. Brother Kaiser, a question from you. Do you think that the Greater Israel plan is going ahead, or there's going to be a ceasefire in Gaza now? So it's, I think it's more kind of in highlights because of Biden going and Trump coming, and they both want to show off that, oh, I've done a ceasefire, but there are also rumors of Greater Israel. They're not stopping here. They're already entering in Syria.
Well, these situations don't have to be mutually exclusive, because it's not the question of if Israel can't do it right now, then it won't be able to do it ever. Well, that's certainly not the case. It has been expanding inch by inch, kilometer by kilometer. If you look at the West Bank right now and you compare that with 1967, it's a completely different picture. So that Greater Israel is already there. There are a vast amount of cities and towns built inside West Bank that are directly connected with mainland Israel. They have the road infrastructure, everything there. So that type of expansion has been happening, but now it is going beyond the West Bank. So what we now have is, for example, the buffer zone between the Syria and Israel. Now Israel is taking that over, and they said that we are going to be there for a foreseeable future, which basically, so far as they're concerned, is it means forever. And they are going to keep on doing what they are doing. I mean, the I mean, one way to stop, or one would think that one way to stop the expansion is to go to the um, two-state solution. Now, that obviously is not something that I'm asking for. It's not something that the people of Palestine are asking for. But from a global perspective, he said that if we are to stop this great wheel of Israel, which is now rolling on the downhill freely, so what would be the first break? Well, the first break would be to have this two-state solution. Now, problem with that is that the amount of money Israel has invested in West Bank by creating these towns and cities, they simply won't just give them up and ask, Palestinians, yeah, why don't you move in? We are going back to Israel. But obviously, that is not going to happen. Now, what right now with Trump coming in and Trump being anti-war consistently, that's at least what he's been claiming, and he's trying to create a worldview where the world is controlled by a few powerful individuals. So this is sort of what he's working on. So it may require that the current war is stopped, the genocide is stopped in Gaza. Maybe that is going to be the part of the plan. But does that mean that this is where it all ends? Well, certainly not. The Islamic eschatology is very clear on this. Because of our actions, we are going to lose the vast swathes of lands that are under our control at the moment, and the expansion would be from North Saudi Arabia all the way to the doors of Medina. How many wars will have been fought by then, small or big? Obviously, the big wars are well prophesized, but the smaller ones along the way, surely they are going to be there because they paved the way for the large-scale wars. So eventually, the Greater Israel, sure, that is going to happen. And to be honest, I don't see any other way, because what happens is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will give you all the facilities that you need, all the time that you need, so that you may reflect. And then you try to pull your weight, and you actually do end up pulling your weight. You assert your significance on the planet. But when you don't do it, the life will be made so hard for you that you will be left with no other option but to realize that you are supposed to be better than that. So right now we are not at the extreme end of the hardship, though it is quite hard already. We are talking about somewhere between 40 to 50,000 deaths. We are talking about Israel expanding. We are talking about the international power struggle weakening Muslims more and more. Yeah, sure, all that is here, but it's still not at its apex. It isn't. That is going to happen. And once that has happened, that is when Imam Mahdi, he will make the call, and that is when people will gather around him, irrespective of how few, but certainly that is what the turning point is going to be. So for us to wake our conscience up, Israel has to expand.
So just a little correction. Lancet, a few months ago, published it was more than 150,000 shuhada in Gaza. And according to the latest figure, the numbers could be as much as 350 or even 350,000 and even more than that. That's from a population of 2 million. And it's a great concern. I think from here, Brother Sahil, do you have any comment before I put the next question out? Okay, so there is another question here, which I will ask both of you. And that question is from someone called Rubina. And the question, I will rearrange that a little bit. That her question is that how do we raise children as pure Islamic soldiers in a country like Pakistan, where everything is going on opposite direction? I'm working, but sometimes so much demotivation comes as there are 3 children and the society is all going in a different direction. So, there's a problem with the communication between the parents and the children and the wider society overall. So I would put that question to you first, Brother Kesser, and then Brother Sahil?
Yeah, sure. Look, I am going through the similar problem, and the number of people I work with, quite often we get the same feedback. How should we do it? And I'm going to quote Sahil Bhai in his presence. He said that until Sira becomes part of your psychology, then there's no point. It's just a book or set of books that you read. Now, question is why Sira? And the answer is that only once did it happen in the human history that a civilization was created in 23 years. 13 years of which were actually the years of persecution. It's only 10 years when the actual system was being built, and it was built in a way that it was a new civilization there. And in one of the ahadith, the Holy Prophet ﷺ, when he was ill towards the end of his life, he referred to him in third person and commented, and again, this is not a verbatim, this is the gist of it, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave option to his abd to either live a glorious and rich life here, also the prophethood like the Dawud and Sulaiman alayhi salam, or have the hardship here and then take what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has reserved for him in hereafter. And he chose the latter, not the former. And Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he started crying because he understood that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is now referring to his death. Important question there is, when the choice was there for Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to either have a prophethood, a nubuwa, like a king, or the other version of it that included jihad, included poverty, included suffering, included everything that you can imagine. Why did he choose that? And the answer, which now becomes very clear, is that Holy Prophet ﷺ wanted to leave an example for the weakest of his followers, to the last ummati, very last, the weakest, that if you are going through the turbulence, if you're going through the problems, look what I did. So nobody could say that because he was the king, therefore he could, I can't. So that is why the seerah is now more important, more than ever, because the problems that Holy Prophet ﷺ had from there on right to the day of judgment, the nature of problems are going to be the same. The execution and the actual the face of the problems might be different, but the nature of the problems is going to be the same. Same problems over and over again. So now people who are worried about what should they do the children and what should they, it's a very simple thing. Look what Holy Prophet ﷺ did. When you raise children, give them a very clear, and I mean, for raising children, I mean, take that as a project, right? When I say take that as a project, it means that you are just given an amana. This is sort of a trust between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you are the trustee, kids are the beneficiary, and the actual owner of the whole trust is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That when you raise them in a way that this is not something that, I'm going to give them whatever they're looking for, and we live in an age where the education is treated as a commodity. So yeah, get a degree, get a job, and all that. Yeah, sure, that is going to happen anyway. But if you infuse everything together and say that whatever this kid is going to do in the service of Islam, then you get a very clear direction, very clear direction. Just two things you have to do. Look at what the natural talent of your kid is and look at the values he was born with. They're two different things. Values are not talent, talent is not values. And even though the siblings, they carry almost identical DNA because they're from the same mom and dad. It's a very small variation, but they all carry different talents and different values. Those talents and values, they actually determine how best they can serve the religion. And if you can put them onto that direction using their values and using their talent, they will excel. And if you can create an army of those type of janissaries, to quote the old Ottoman, because that's what they used to do with their children. So they're always generation after generation of janissaries, and that's how they've been able to to conquer the masses and so forth. So if we are to conquer the land of intellect yet again, land of philosophy, land of science, land of even physical wars, and finances, we need to have that army of Janissaries yet again. Just look at these two things, put them on the path. Inshallah, you'll be fine.
Jazakallah khair. Brother Sahil, comments from your end. The reason I took this question, although it's not about Syria, but it's about keep making the future generation ready for what we are talking about. Brother Sahil, would you like to comment on this question? Or you want me to repeat the question? I'm unable to hear from your end.
Hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
There's a problem going on with my microphone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I will just quote the Quran, Surah Muhammad. Actually, before that, we should go into the concept that we know that Allah Azza wa Jal has stated very clearly that it is upon Allah Azza wa Jal, it's taken up upon him his own self to help the mu'mineen. Use the word haq, that means that this is a right of the moment that Allah Azza wa Jal is going to help in the Quran. Now, building up what just Kessa said, that, if you want to, the Quran, Allah Ta'ala in Surah Muhammad says, if you want to be helped by Allah Azza wa Jal, then you help Allah Azza wa Jal first. No, we know Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't require help, which means that, if you want to be Ansar Allah, then what is it that the job is for all Muslims? I mean, you have to walk on bare feet on coals, burning coals. I know that is the test. That is something which we inevitably have to do now. And the more we're going to start to find shortcuts into getting into the bigger game, the farther we're going to go away from the essence of Islam. So we gotta pay the price. If you want Allah to help you, then Allah Azza wa Jal says, Kunu Ansar Allah. Become the Ansar of Allah. Allah Azza wa Jal requires you to walk the line. And this is as brutal the truth as I can tell you, that you will suffer, there will be blood, there will be hardship, there will be turmoil. And unless you go through whatever Allah told you to, and that promise that Allah took upon his own self to help you is not going to come. It is that simple. So we need to understand that we need to raise our daughters and sons. We need to train our husbands and wives into going towards that perspective, generating that perspective of life that, the more, we strive towards getting ease, the less we are going to survive, and our generations will become weaker and weaker. So I'm telling you this right now, my Muslim brothers and sisters, that there are only two things that we can do. One, we combine together. We instantaneously start to look for the next Muslim and start getting this network made, and tell them that, what, calamity is upon us. The more we go towards the path of Islam, the harder it's going to become. So make sure, we are not, painting a wrong picture for Muslims. When I started IMS, and I'm sure Casser has gone through the same thing. People came in for the glamour of things. People came in for the fun of things. People came in just to look for that archetype which they see in movies and whatever. That's not how it works. You gotta put in your time. You gotta give your space, your effort, even your money sometimes, and you gotta pay right this whole saga of triumph with your own blood, like literally. So you want to do the job that Sahabas did. That's the only job, by the way. There is no other job. And then you gotta go through what Sahabas went through as well. You gotta stand on the day of judgment under the banner of the Prophet ﷺ on the banks of Kawthar. Then you gotta be bloody and battered. You gotta be bruised. I'm sorry, there is no other way. So, especially to my mothers and my sisters who were raising Muslim kids, you better make them understand that, we need resilient children. And why is resilience for? Well, to bear the pain, to put the grunt force in. The real problem is that, we try and come up with the psychology of getting there sooner, and we are envisioning, Islam version of Islam is not gonna. That doesn't believe in getting there sooner. It believes in getting everybody there. So if you walk alone, you're gonna get get there faster. But if you walk together, you're gonna go further. It's just common sense. So there shouldn't be any shortcuts. There shouldn't be any plan of ease. And our first generation right now, people who are alive right now, should be raising the next generation with real expectations that, what, we are at the bottom pit right now, in no matter what angle you look at it from. And it's our own doing. And mothers should, raise their sleeves and tie their dupattas on their foreheads and try and get to work now. And that's how babies are raised. That's how Muslim men and women are raised. Men should be changing the definitions of careers and success. That's job one. And unless we have enough Muslims to change the meaning of career and success, you're not going to get real blood flowing through the ummah. Right now, this is bad blood flowing through the ummah. This should go out. Otherwise, you gotta, if you can't oxygenate that blood, then you gotta replace the blood. And Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran in Surah Muhammad that if you're not gonna do this, I'm gonna replace you with people who are better than you. Like literally, he uses the word better than you, and he uses the word replace inside Surah Muhammad. So you need to be very careful that this is not I mean, this is not just anybody. Islam is not just anybody's business. You can't just, casually wing it and, achieve the goals of Islam. Islam has a purpose. If mommies don't have an awareness of what the purpose of Islam has a purpose. If it's a news to you, then, you're not inside Islam right now. And Muslims are a party to that purpose. And if you're not party to that purpose, then stop calling yourself Muslim. There are many things that are happening inside the name of Islam. Go to those factions. Okay. Don't. This is real business, real work, and we need real people who can put in years of after years of dedicated work with absolutely no triumph, because there is no uh, guarantee of success in Islam. Guarantee of success is post death. Okay. So these are the 2 or 3 common factors every mother and father should uh, be trained into. And what does it require? It requires the sacrifice of everything that you believe in. Yeah, literally everything. So are we going to get everybody to do that? No, of course not. Are we going to get less than 1%? Well, that's the job of every one of us to make sure that that number goes up. People who can put real efforts in, they should come together, and that's all we need. We don't need 2 billion Muslims. We don't even need 200 million Muslims. We need literally Muslims in thousands right now who can come together and decide that all my life is dedicated to this job. This is called Islam, and this is my career, and I am going to meet my Prophet ﷺ, and the day of judgment is real, and I am going to meet my Allah, my Maker, my Rabb, my Lord, and the day, and that's the day I'm going to get promoted. That's my first promotion, the only promotion I require in this career. Otherwise, I'm going to be an entry level worker in this career, and you know, and it's going to be brutal. It is going to hurt. and that is the job. That's the only way to look at Islam.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Sahil. Being a mother myself and having the Pakistani background and growing up in Scotland, in the UK, I can certainly say I do get shocked when I go to Pakistan, because whenever I go to Pakistan, I see ladies are indulged in luxuries, in dramas, in fashion. Whereas, when I see practicing Muslim mothers here, a lot of them new Muslims as well, it literally comes to my mind what you said. Allah will replace you if you're not going to perform your job. I was in Spain, and I visited the new masjid opposite to Alhambra, and they get at least 6 to 7 shahadas every day, people coming to Islam. And then you hear atheism spreading in the Muslim land, secularism spreading in the Muslim land. It is very clear. Allah doesn't need us. We need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Jazakallah khair for putting that forward. We'll take 2 more questions from the audience, one for Brother Sahil and one for Brother Kesser, and then we'll wrap it up. Brother Khizar, would you be able to take the question from the next person? And just a reminder, when you're unmuted for the question, keep the question to the topic, and inshallah we'll go from there onward.
Hubab, unmute yourself. Okay, I'm moving towards next participant. Ahmad Kamal, please unmute your mic. Fardeen Khan.
Assalamualaikum. My question is to Sahil Adin, that what do you think, is it more beneficial for you to go and work in the Pakistan, or it's better for you to go spread the message outside the Pakistan? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Where are you right now? Well, if you're not in Pakistan, then see, listen,
I'm in Canada, Toronto, Canada.
you can spread the message from wherever you are. That's not place dependent, right? But wherever you are right now, you make sure you understand the equity of that place. You need to cash into that equity, and you got to build it up first. If you're in Toronto right now, you need to understand that whatever you can achieve in Toronto. I just explained to you the basics of how this world is run right now. So if you can be a party to running the planet, you're at better odds of running this planet through Toronto, not through Toba Take Singh. This is how, I'm sorry, that's how this is the bitter truth. So if you're in Toronto, you got to raise Muslims to understand how power is done. And this sister right now, I'm not know if you were in Scotland, how are you in England? When we hear spreading the message, we hear the Muslims are coming into masjids in Spain or whatever and giving their shahada. I get a little, I get palpitations. I get a little, nervous as to are we bringing more Muslims to our current worldview? I mean, or are we preparing our kids and current Muslims, or even the new Muslims, into the right worldview, the right world order? Because you know what, you need to understand. If we are actually bringing more people into our worldview, then we're contributing towards the problem. This is a game of attrition right now. We need enough people who want to network and come together and make blocks right now, right here. That's what we need. And blocks in Toronto, or blocks in Vancouver, blocks in Manitoba are going to matter more. Blocks in Montreal are going to matter more than blocks in Delhi or Dhaka or Islamabad. I'm sorry, that's how it is. But Toronto Muslims would need the Islamabad Muslim. That's how blocks are made. Vancouver Muslims would need, the Delhi Muslims, the Dhaka Muslims. I mean, that's how blocks are made. But even the Pakistani Muslims need the American Muslims or the Canadian Muslims to prosper. So I want, and that's what I'm trying to actually urge Muslims to create those blogs. There are very few things that you can do to create a blog. It's rather simple. You sponsor kids from all the group's money, go into bigger institutes, learn politics, learn how to make money, learn how to make science, and then you activate those kids. And that's how job is done. They're going to take a 5 or 10 year span into coming about. But that's how, that's if enough Muslims are making either one of these three, they combine to produce electricity. It is that simple. So if you're in Toronto right now, I'd rather put you to use than somebody in Multan, you know. So you better be very, very equipped with Toronto. You should understand Toronto. You should understand the value of Toronto. You should understand the system of Toronto. And then you'll be able to use Toronto. Otherwise, if you're still living in Islamabad watching GR, ARY, and GO and trying to play, pit Nawaz Sharif against Imran Khan inside the houses of Toronto, your kids are going to still, you know, be that psychologically, involved in where they're supposed. I mean, they should be involved in Toronto and getting political capital inside Toronto. And I'm not talking about just going to the ballot box and casting votes. I'm talking about global politics and influence. Let me give you an example so that you understand. I know a girl, and I've actually literally written to that girl because she's a 23-year-old kid right now. She's not a kid, obviously, but figuratively speaking, she's not a Muslim. She's a Swedish girl who has written the foreign policy to be for Pakistan. She's done it for 3, 4 more countries, which is very powerful. And the way she's actually influencing Sweden to make sure Pakistan behaves according to the Swedish friendly or Scandinavian friendly foreign policy. And this 23-year-old child who has just done her, degree in social sciences has the acumen developed to try and call the shots on South Asia. Maybe she'll be successful, maybe she won't, but she's certainly on the right lines. And that's exactly how our Muslim kids should be developed. And I'm not just talking about all of them become politicians. I'm talking about some of them really going into business, we helping them going into business. This whole blockchain should prosper their businesses. Some of them going into politics, some of them going into sciences, so that all of these things combine to generate that electricity. This electricity is called a lobby. That lobby is going to dictate literally whether we can do something in Syria or not, sitting in Pakistan. That's what I mean. So you want to spread the message. Well, this is the message that I would want you to spread. If you have any other message, then that could be spread anywhere, right? But if this is the message that you want to spread, then yeah, Toronto is a better place than Peshawar.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Sir. Last question we'll take from sorry, Jazakallah khair, Brother Sahil. Last question we will take from Kesar Ahmed Raja. Could you take question, please?
Assalamu alaikum. My question is that if no information is accurate on the news, which I agree with, can we really and truly trust academic literature and theoretical studies? Because don't we need to consider the personal biases of the authors also, and the people that they're asking their questions for their studies, and their work is also come from majority Western scholars. So it's just about where do we actually get information? Like, that's my question. Apart from, if you don't have these connections, does that mean we just don't have information?
Oh, sorry. This
That's
question is
fine.
not
So
directed to me.
no, that's fine. By all
I think
means,
you can
don't.
both answer the question.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sure.
Well, there's a simple technique. So, sister, you should know that you read a book, you're going to find a lot of people who are going to write a critique to that book as well. Doesn't really happen in Pakistan that much, but wherever you are in Scotland or England, you're going to find, especially in history, especially on politically painted subjects. So you're going to find a lot more. You just have to put your time into it. You need to see, the left view and the right view on things. There's so much that comes. I mean, there's a reaction industry. It's called a reaction industry, by the way. So whenever a movie comes out or news comes out or a book comes out, this industry thrives on publishing a reaction towards it. So there are so many books that sell so much because they're a reaction to a previously famous book. So you need to see that there are articles, there are books that are written against that point of view. For example, let me just give an example: Palestine. So you read John Peterson, and when you read John Peterson, you're going to literally get convinced. I'm telling you, as a first-hand victim of this, you get convinced the way they write and the way they, but you need to be, you use the right word. There's a subconscious biasness or a personal biasness and a self-preservation biasness that everybody has. So you go through John Peterson work, and then you go through Noam Chomsky's work, and then you go through, you know, Dershowitz's work. You find out that, you know what, this is, or Benny Mars. Benny Mars, look into Benny Mars, okay? A very, very good historian. And then you see, you're going to find out, you're going to generate your IQ on your own. Same timeline, same subject, different figures. Same subject, same timeline, same figures, different reasons. You're going to find that out yourself. You generate IQ through this. So I'm just talking about 4 writers on the same subject in the same timeline about reactions to whatever was going on. For example, Kessa was mentioning the percentage of the settlers in the West Bank. You need to understand there is a thing called the contiguous Israel. Now, the country of Israel has to be contiguous. That's how they win elections, okay? You cannot separate any part of Israel, whether it's just a tiny little community of settlers in whatever part of Israel. So there has to be a road. They have the specification of the width of the road, like literally the width. So that road has to connect to every single part of whatever settler community Israel is establishing. So, and not just the road, but the community has to be established under the CRP rules, the City and Regional Planning Committee, which Israel has, of course, in place. Every country has that. So that apartment building or that locality, there cannot be a tent. There cannot be a refurbished home. There cannot be in a certain location. So the whole city planning goes into place. Why? Because the country of Israel has to be contiguous. Now, Palestine is not contiguous. You cannot go to different parts of Palestine at the same time. So how do we know that? We go through the books and we go through people who wrote for it, people who go against it, and then you get your own rationale right there. You develop your IQ right away. Now, why I'm telling you is so that you will understand before you even start the books that you're going to have to read. You will have to read more than a book, and then you'll have to read more than that kind of book, and then you'll have to read more than just a few writers because they'll be, for that point of view. So just like the Quran, for example, when I give the Quran to somebody and I tell them to go through the tafsir, what do I tell them? Everybody has to know that you have to read from your time, a scholar from your area, and then you got to read from not your time and not a scholar from your area. And then you got to reference it from the pre-classical or even the classical tafsir of Arabia. Obviously, there is no other tafsir from any other place in that time. So Arabian pre-classical or classical tafsir, and then you compare these 3. So this is a trifecta. That's how you generate. Even the Quran, the tafsir is going to be tainted with the personal bias. You'll see.
I guess my dilemma is then, if I'm looking at all these different sources, will I ever be able to come up with an original opinion? Or
Yeah,
am
of
I
course
just
you're going to come
taking
up
a
with
bit from this, a bit from that?
You're going to come up with the least you're going to come up with is an original opinion. Whether it's going to be right or wrong, that we can debate to facts. But your opinion will be original because you gain enough IQ, and if you're you have enough emotions, putting into it, you're going to generate an original opinion. But if you read a book, then you're never going to come up with an original opinion. That will be somebody else's subconscious dictation of your
Mhm.
your opinion, right?
So in order to apply this to my Islamic knowledge, I'll need to read up on different Islamic scholars and see what they all have to say about particular issues, and then that can help me build up my own understanding and view. Is that right?
Yeah. Plus, when you listen to Islamic scholar, you got to see where they're born and where they're coming from as well. That's why I don't really listen to Islamic clerics from America because they're not allowed to say a lot of things. I'm not saying they're bad people. Or I'm saying they're not allowed to. Okay.
Can you
So
give me an example of one person that you think who's not limited, or we'll see whatever
well,
on
if
social
you
media?
no, there's not. I'll give you a filter. If a man is in trouble by 2 or more countries, then that means he's breaking those limits that people put upon him. Okay. So
Are you
since I
referring
suffer
to
from that,
yourself by any chance?
no, and not just me, anyone. Okay, starting with our Prophet ﷺ, he was, you know, being pressured by different countries. Different cases were upon him. People wanted to assassinate him. People wanted to literally kill him through all the means that they had because he was not abiding by the political correctness dictated by the regimes of his own time. That's your basic go-to person. Okay, so and
So I'll
I
listen to somebody that I see most people are talking against because that person is saying something different.
sister, the most amount of literature written against by human beings against one man is our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's you Google it up, you'll find out. You'll research, you'll find out the most amount of literature against one man is our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So that is not a criteria. If anything, that's a criteria for the truth.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Brother Kaiser, do you have comments on this, please?
Yeah, since we are pretty much out of time, I'll just like to mention 2 quick things. Number one, sister, you need to have your epistemological foundation really firm because it is a type of a rain of different type of information which is going to, I mean, information is going to rain down upon you. And if you have that umbrella, that is going to save you. By that umbrella, I mean that epistemological foundation. So you know your faith. For example, I moved to the UK in November 2001. So November 2001 means a few weeks after the 9/11. And that was a very difficult time to be in the UK for someone like me. I was only about 19 years of age with no Islamic websites, or there was no digitization of the knowledge of the Islamic knowledge that took place at that time. It's very, very difficult because they literally made you feel like an extremist, the whole system against you. And I'm not just referring to myself, I am talking about millions of people who were living in the West at that time. And many people who did not have their epistemological foundation firm enough, they were blown away. They actually became much more, I mean, many of the terms that you use in the UK, I mean, I'm not saying that we probably shouldn't use them on air anyway, but the terms that you use, I'm trying to avoid one, but there is one really trying to force its way out of my mouth. Okay, let's call it coconut, for example. Those terms came into being because of certain behaviors of the Muslims who were Muslims, but they became type of self-haters in a way that they started propagating the agenda that was actually designed against them, against the Muslims as the community. But if you had your epistemological foundation safe, then you're not going to get affected by no matter how much of news you are literally suffering from, because we all suffer from news, don't we? So that's one thing. The second thing is, if you really want to find out the truth, just look at how they are talking about 2 near identical issues. So, for example, when they talk about Palestine and they talk about Ukraine, for example, and when you look at them, when they talk about the Afghan government, how do they take them? Because they had a sweeping takeover of Afghanistan, or they had the Syrian rebels, same thing again. So what countries they've been sending their envoys to, what countries they've been putting embargoes on, how the news has been covered for one set, because we are talking about the near identical issues. And if you see disparities there, you know straight away that these people are in the business of misinformation and even disinformation. And that is how you start a filter before you go into it. And then more you see them doing that, more clearer you become that I need to stay away from these people.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Kaiser. And okay. Do you have something to say? Okay, I think we'll end the questions here. And Jazakallah khair, Brother Sahil and Brother Kaisar, for coming. Just a few take-home messages. We have to connect back to our fitra, our moral compass. The times are coming that we have to be united and we have to think outside our personal circles. This is not the time where we just think that my money, my life, and my kids, and that's about it. And it's not the time where we can just enjoy the luxury life, because that's not going to get us anywhere in the akhirah. So we need to connect for akhirah, and we have so many different platforms now, whether it's the revival platform from Brother Kesser Ahmed Raja, whether it's IMS from Brother Sahil, and the TGA from our platform from the Global Awakening. At the end of the day, everything is connecting the dots so that we can become stronger as an ummah. Jazakallah khair for coming again on this podcast, giving us generous time, taking the question. I hope it was beneficial for everyone, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive for our shortcomings and help us to stand together, holding on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala together, so we can at least die with some sort of peace. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you very much indeed. This has been an honor. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair. Wa alaikum assalam.